Good morning. Welcome to Daily Focus. I trust that you had a wonderful weekend. We had an amazing weekend. We were able to witness our third son's wedding and to be able to see their joy of joining their lives together to one. And we certainly are excited for their new life together. And so we had a great day in church yesterday. I trust that you did as well, and that your heart is full and ready to face another week that God has graciously put in your path, and the opportunities to glorify Him, the opportunities that He's going to give us to witness, the opportunities that He's going to give us to come alongside to help and to serve and to encourage those that He puts along our way. And so Proverbs chapter 13, we're looking at some very specific thoughts again. And as comes up in the book of Proverbs over and over again, he's going to address how we speak again. But we're not going to deal with that in its entirety, but we're going to deal with specifically verse number 7. And in verse number 7 just talks about being genuine, being real. And so let's read the first 9 verses and we'll make some comments. A wise son heareth his father's instruction, but a scorner heareth not rebuke. A man shall eat good by the fruit of his mouth, but the soul of the transgressors shall eat violence. He that keepeth his mouth keepeth his life, but he that openeth wide his lips shall have destruction. The soul of the sluggard desireth and hath nothing, but the soul of the diligent shall be made fat. A righteous man hateth lying, but a wicked man is loathsome and cometh to shame. Righteousness keepeth him that is upright in the way, but wickedness overthroweth the sinner. There is that maketh himself rich, yet hath nothing. There is that maketh himself poor, yet hath great riches. The ransom of a man's life are his riches, but the poor heareth not rebuke. The light of the righteous rejoiceth, but the lamp of the wicked shall be put out, or literally goeth out. And so really the contrasting in all of these verses is simply there's a right way to live and there's a wrong way to live. If you live right, there is blessing. And if you live wrong, there is consequences. And so we see that theme over and over again throughout the book of Proverbs. Here we find it referencing the way we speak. God again talks about in verse number 3, he that keepeth his mouth keepeth his life. But the one who opens wide his mouth, it leads to destruction. And God is again reminding us it's not just what we say, and it's not just how we say it. It's whether or not we should say it at all. And so that's where discernment comes in. That's where wisdom comes in. And this path of wisdom is really an important track for every Christian. It's the path of blessing. And so God gives us those warnings. He starts this whole dialogue with the phrase, the son who hears the instruction of his father is a wise son. One that wants to listen to the person who on earth may love him more than anybody else. Parents love their kids more than anyone else on the face of the earth. When it is the family dynamic, the way God designed it. I often would tell my kids when they were young, someday you may understand a parent's love for their child. But right now you just can't understand it. And those who have never had children cannot really wrap their minds around it. But God is saying, you need to listen to someone who truly loves you, who has your best interests at heart. And it reminds us that we need to listen to God who loves us and has our best interest at heart. And God isn't up there trying to make your life miserable. God isn't up there trying to figure out a way to frustrate you. That's not God at all. God loves you and He knows what's best for you, and He has your best interests at heart as it relates to the eternal picture. And so often we are so temporal minded, we're so selfish here on this earth that we sometimes don't want to hear what is good in the big picture. We just want what we want now. And we think somehow that will make us happy. And that's where verse number 1 is setting the tone in these contrasts. Well, verse number 7 gives us another contrast. And just reading it, you could almost jump to the wrong conclusion. You could almost think this is dealing with selfishness. And it says, there is that maketh himself rich, yet hath nothing. In other words, you can almost read this and think, the guy who goes out and he, through deceit, builds wealth, through taking advantage of people, builds wealth, people that go out and step on whoever they have to step on and violate whatever laws they have to violate in order to create riches. There are people who can go out and do it, and there are people who have. And it's through selfishness that they get their riches. And then the poor, the one that maketh himself poor, yet hath great riches. We can say, well, the guy who's serving everyone, he's a generous giver. Though he may not have a lot of money himself, he's really invested in a way that he has great riches. Well, that's a great principle, and that's certainly all true. And it's just not what this verse talks about at all. And so sometimes we have to study a little bit rather than just read and guess. And really, this is talking about a lack of being genuine. This is just not being real. So there are those who pretend to be rich. They want everyone to think they're rich. They many times are in debt up to their ears. They're robbing Peter to pay Paul. They're trying to just barely keep their head above. They're constantly needing to find ways to get more money because of the fact that they're spending so much money that they're constantly in this state of flux. But they want everyone to think they have money, and yet the day's going to catch up with them and reality's going to set in. And whether it's filing for bankruptcy or whether it's just realizing that you don't have any money and the creditors come and take away everything you're in debt for, that day comes for the person who's pretending. And then there are some on the other side. They want everyone to think they don't have any money, and so that no one ever asks them for any money. No one ever assumes they have any money, and so they live as if they're really poor, and yet they have plenty of money. And so God is just giving us a lesson, and he is saying, you know what? You know what's more important? Honesty. You know what's more important? Transparency. You know what's more important? Just being real. And he said, don't pretend. Don't pretend to be something you're not. Here it's dealing with money. And he says, don't pretend to have money if you don't. You're not doing anything. It doesn't matter how many people you fool. It's not true. And don't pretend to be poor if you got money. Don't give the wrong impression just so that you can keep more to yourself. Even if you fool everyone, you haven't fooled God, and it's not true. And so he's just talking about being real, but this application is bigger than that. Don't pretend to have talents God never entrusted to you, but then don't have talents that you pretend to not have or that you pretend God didn't give to you so that you don't have to use them. Nobody asked you, because that's not honest. Don't pretend that you have all these opportunities if God hasn't entrusted them to you, but then don't ignore the opportunities God has entrusted to you so that you somehow don't take advantage of them. God is just going to really zero in, and he is going to say, would you please just be real? Because the path of wisdom is a genuine path. It's an honest path. And it simply is saying, what I have has been given to me by God, and I am a steward. And the best way I know how, I'm going to take all that has been entrusted to me and I'm going to use it so that people come to a right conclusion about God. So that when I stand before him, I can hear, well done, thou good and faithful servant. It's so important to not pretend, but to be genuine, to be honest, to be real. I trust that you'll be that way today. The Lord bless you. I'll see you tomorrow at 9.